Hi, seventh graders. Today we're going to look at the Marbury V Madison case and its shaping and legacy of the U.S. Supreme Court, which is profound. It's arguably the most important U.S. Supreme Court case. So let's get a little background on it. John Adams, pretty bitter about losing the election. Knew that the Democratic Republicans were going to have full control of the government. So he wanted to do something to have a lasting legacy, even though he lost. Working with the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall, he pushes forward in the last 45 days of his presidency after he lost the election a group of, quote, midnight judges. One of them, a few of them on the night before Jefferson's inauguration. So he pushes all these federal judges. And that's a big deal because if you're a federal judge, you serve for life. You're there until they get RID of you, rid of you. You resign or retire. You're impeached for committing a crime, or you die. Those are the only ways that you stop being U.S. Supreme Court Justice. So if you're a U.S. Supreme Court Justice or a federal judge, you could serve for decades. This would give Adams and the Federalists a long legacy. And then Jefferson, of course, as president, now as the third president, wants to appoint members of his party to those positions that are lifetime positions, and he doesn't want the Federalists to be controlling the courts. So he decides, well, I'm not going to finalize their appointments. He tells his Secretary of State, ignore their commissions, basically let them rot on your desk, and we'll just let them expire, and then we'll appoint the people that we want. Well, one of the appointments, a guy by the name of William Marbury, is irate. He's frustrated. He's saying that the Judiciary Act of 1789, law passed by Congress, empowered the U.S. Supreme Court to require federal officials to fulfill their duties. One of those duties should be, according to Mr. Marbury, completing his commission. The appointment was done before. All had to be done was signed. A president appointed him. A Secretary of State needs to sign it. That's it. And Marbury argued that Madison was neglecting his duty and was calling upon the U.S. Supreme Court with the Federal Judiciary Act to force Madison to recognize his commission. So it goes to court, and here's the decision of Marbury v. Madison. One is unanimous. All the justices vote. And they do vote in Marbury's favor, but not completely. We'll explain that. So the opinion, number one, was written by that Chief Justice John Marshall. You could argue the most powerful and long-lasting and legacy of any Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. So, one, they found that Marbury's commission was valid, so yes, he needs to get that job. But two, they also found that the law that Marbury was arguing in favor was actually an unconstitutional law because it assigned power to one of them, one of the three branches, namely the U.S. Supreme Court. But it basically said that nobody can assign power to any of the three branches of government. None of the three branches can give powers to themselves or to the other branches. The only way to do that is to amend the Constitution. And therefore, they argue, the Judiciary Act, this law, is null and void. Now, them declaring this law unconstitutional is a big deal. This is the first time a U.S. Supreme Court ever declares a law unconstitutional. And that's an immense power. Basically, the judiciary expands its power with Marbury v. Madison. It gives itself a power that's not in the Constitution, which is ironic because they're saying that powers can't be given to the branches by the branch. And in the same decision, they give themselves a power called judicial review. Now, they argue that they always had it, even though it's not specifically defined in the Constitution. They argue that through the power of interpretation of the laws, well, if you can interpret that it's unconstitutional, then you can overturn it. So this power is called judicial review. Essentially, if a law is seen to be unconstitutional, the U.S. Supreme Court can render it invalid, can kill any law. So conceivably, you could have a law that all 535 members of Congress vote yes on, and the president signs, and yet the U.S. Supreme Court in a decision can overturn it. And this gives the judicial branch a very, very powerful check on the legislative or the executive branch. Now you can't just do anything you want, pass any law you want, or the president can't do any sort of action that they want, because the U.S. Supreme Court can render those actions unconstitutional and cancel them out. And this is going to have a really long-lasting impact on shaping U.S. history and law. Hence why the doors to enter the U.S. Supreme Court have a relief showing Marbury V Madison and Marshall delivering the decision on it. They see it as the foundation of the court itself. The U.S. Supreme Court will overturn hundreds of laws throughout the next 240 some odd years of American history. And it will also overturn thousands of state laws. Again, the judiciary reviewing laws passed saying, sorry, they're unconstitutional. And many people who study political science would argue that it is the power of judicial review that makes the judiciary the most powerful of the three branches of government, because they can cancel out the laws or actions of the other two. So, what is the power of judicial review, and should the U.S. Supreme Court have this power? I'd like to hear your answers. I can't wait to read them. Have a wonderful Tuesday.